Annyeong! Welcome back to another episode of GoBilly Q&A. This is a series where I take questions from you. Over the past couple of years, I've been asked a few times to talk about Korean names. Why are they structured the way they are, what they mean, and why do so many Korean people have the same last names? So in this video, I'll present what I think is the most important information to know about Korean names. Korean names traditionally have 3 syllables in them. The first one, the last name, or sung in Korean, and the next two, the first name, or iram. For example, if you have the Korean name Kim Chul-soo, Kim would be the last name and Chul-soo would be the first name. So the last name goes first and the first name goes last, so it's opposite from English. However, these days, some people are breaking that tradition and giving their children names with only 2 syllables in them. For example, you could meet someone with the name Kim-gu. In this case, Kim would be the last name and Gu would be the first name. These types of names still aren't common, but they're becoming more and more popular. Or you might even meet people who have names with more than 3 syllables in them, such as Irurira. Usually these longer names are given because they mean a specific thing. And in this case, Irurira means will achieve in Korean. And that brings us to our next point, what Korean names mean. Now, Korean last names are simply handed down from the father to the children, but first names are selected by the parents. And there are 2 types of names that a Korean parent can actually choose for their child. Sino-Korean names, Sino meaning China, or pure Korean names. Of those 2, Sino-Korean names are the most common, and they're made by taking 2 Chinese characters that have the same sound as the Korean name that they want it to be. Here's how that works. So say that my last name is Go, and I want to have a kid and name him Wonbin. Now, I like the sound of Wonbin, but now I have to pick 2 Chinese characters that have the sounds Won and Bin. So I'd take a Chinese character dictionary and find a character for Won with a meaning that I liked, and then do the same thing for Bin. And since there are tens of thousands of different Chinese characters in the language, and at least dozens for each of the sounds Won and Bin, depending on which characters I choose, the name Wonbin can have a completely different meaning. Let's take a closer look at that using this name, Lee So-young. Now, the last name Yi is pretty common and already has a Chinese character attached to it, so we don't have to worry about that. So let's look at So-young. Now, So-young isn't that rare of a name, and if you live in Korea, you might know 1 or 2 people with that name. But that doesn't mean that every So-young has the same Chinese characters in their name. Let's take a look at 2 examples. Both of these names will be written the same in Hangul, but will have different Chinese characters. So this means that these 2 same names will have 2 different meanings. Now, the first So-young here means bright and pure flower, and the second one means always beautiful and intelligent. And while both of these names sound good, the parents might prefer one or the other. But you have to be really careful when you're selecting the Chinese characters for a name. And here's another example of a So-young that's also possible. Now, even though this name is also So-young, it uses a different character for So, which means a skin sore, and a different character for Young, which means a grave. So this So-young would have a meaning more like get a skin disease and die. If my parents named me using these characters, I'd probably get a name change. And while it's not so common in America for people to change their names, it's fairly common in Korea. I also have several Korean friends who've changed their name because they didn't like how it sounded. So Korean parents will sometimes even consult professionals when selecting their child's name, just to make sure that they give them a good one. But not all of Korean names come from Chinese characters, and there are some that just come from regular Korean words. For example, you could have a Korean with the name Kim Maru, Kim being the last name and Maru being a Korean word that means the top of a mountain. Or Pak Byeol, Pak being the last name and Byeol meaning star being the first name. Now, pure Korean names are much less common, and they're also simpler to make because they don't require Chinese characters. Now, the most common Korean last names are Kim, Lee, Pak, and Chae. But there are others as well. So you might be wondering, why do so many Korean people have the same last names? And in order to understand that, let's take a journey back in time to the history of ancient Korea. Or I could just tell you right now and we'll skip it. A long time ago, only the upper class and royalty could have last names, while slaves, which actually made up about 30% of the entire population, couldn't have a last name. But in the late 1800s, this changed, and Korea went through a lot of social reforms, including allowing everyone to have a last name. So slaves, who were suddenly now able to have a last name, wanted to pick ones that could set them apart from their past. So they chose ones that were from the last names of previous Korean ruling families. And since Korea didn't have that many ruling families, they ended up picking a lot of the same ones, Kim, Lee, Pak, and Chae. So even though so many Koreans have the same last names, that doesn't mean that they're related to each other. It just means that they could have chosen it from royalty in the past, or they could actually be directly related to royalty themselves. And that's the end of the episode. Feel free to send me your own questions and I might answer them in the next episode. And remember that new videos are posted here every week, so click subscribe and follow along. 그럼 다음에 또 봐! Did you know that Korea calculates age differently than other countries? If you could somehow continue to see yourself improving, then your motivation would stay. So you want to make sure that you have a good reason for taking the time to learn Korean.